With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Getting engaged is a moment worth cherishing. A one-of-a-kind ring that you design at Blue Nile can help your love sparkle. Just choose your diamond and setting. When you've found the one, you'll get it delivered right to your door. Finding the right engagement ring can be nerve-wracking. At Blue Nile, you'll have the expert guidance needed and a diamond guarantee that ensures you're getting the highest quality at the best price. Cherish all of life's moments and save up to 30% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Never has the issue of athlete welfare been more in the headlines. Many of the bodies responsible for running our Olympic and Paralympic sports programmes have had to deal with allegations involving their approach to welfare and safeguarding. Bullying, sexism, discrimination, eating disorders, the failings in elite sport in this country are sharply in focus. So who looks out for the athletes themselves? And where does an athlete go if they've been subjected to this unacceptable behaviour? I'm John.
And I'm Michael, and this is Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy. Together, John and I have over 5 decades of experience of covering the biggest sporting events on the planet and working with some of the most familiar names in world sport. Great British Bosses is the interview series where we talk to the men and women responsible for running sport in this country. In this episode, we're in conversation with someone who's witnessed both sides of the conversation. She was a 2-time world champion and won a bronze medal at the 2008 Paralympic Games in Beijing. She's also held roles with the British Paralympic Association and WADA, and works with the English Institute of Sport and the Athletics Integrity Unit.
Hi, I'm Victoria Aggar and I'm chair of the British Athletes Commission.
What is the British Athletes Commission?
So the British Athletes Commission was set up a few years ago now, back in around 2004, in advance of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, by a small group of athletes that really felt that they needed some independent advice, support or representation. Fast forward, to 10, 20 years, and the BAC now is a pretty established organisation with high performance system that really does that with some really expert and professional staff, so that athletes can reach out and get some really independent advice. And it
covers all Olympic and Paralympic sports?
Yeah, so our membership, any athlete that becomes onto UK Sports World-Class Performance Programme, so that's most elite athletes looking forward to an Olympic or Paralympic Games, are automatically members of the British Athletes Commission. Alongside that, we have other sports like England Netball and the LTA, the Lawn Tennis Association, that also buy membership from the BAC for their world-ranked players or their first teams.
And is it a case, Vicki, that it's mainly to do with stuff that's going on in training or stuff that is happening as you're preparing for games, the day-to-day kind of things that need sorting? Or is it looking at bigger, wider issues, some of the things that we talked about in the introduction?
It's a bit of both. So we're open to any athlete, whether that's a minor dispute around a selection decision or an inability, a breakdown in relationship between a peer or a coach within their sport, right the way through to receiving some really disturbing disclosures around abuse and negligence and some horrible experience within the high performance environment.
You talk about sort of disturbing episodes there, and we said right in the introduction, Vicki, that this has never been more sharply in focus. How busy, if you like, have you been over the past few weeks and months? We've seen a panorama programme on eating disorders. I guess that comes into your remit. Amy Tinkler, the British bronze medalist from Rio, the gymnast, has been very public in her battle with the governing body. So how much have you been dealing with these issues over the past few months?
Yeah, we've been phenomenally busy. As such, we've had to bring in additional staff to cope with the demand of athletes reaching out. We've set up a very bespoke unit to support gymnasts particularly, but also with it, pretty much in the last 2 years, we're seeing 100% increase year on year on athletes contacting us and reaching out across, a wide range of sports and not just gymnastics.
Let's talk about the British gymnastics story for a moment. Is this something that's new, or do the athletes just simply now feel empowered to be able to come forward and tell their story?
I think the production of the Athlete A, the release of the Athlete A documentary on Netflix was a big, perhaps a trigger for other athletes to feel that they should speak out to. So I think this is probably, we anticipated something potentially coming off the back of Athlete A going live. We probably didn't estimate the significant response that we've had. As it's been publicly known, 350 athletes have now gone and submitted evidence or of some kind to the White Review, which is investigating this practice. So is it new? I think within gymnastics, I actually think there's a global issue, but I am concerned that there's a number of sports that where we're still seeing issues coming up time and time again, and that's not new.
Yeah, you mentioned a number of sports there, and I know we'll talk probably a little bit more about gymnastics, but a quick Google search, for example, would show that swimming, canoeing, weightlifting, cycling, is there just simply a toxic system? Has public money put a toxic system together in terms of elite sport in this country?
I wouldn't go as far as a toxic system, and it's a really difficult one to answer, because I've been an athlete on the other side. I actually had a really positive experience, and I've worked with a number of sports when I was with the British Paralympic Association, where there was fantastic examples of a really great working culture, brilliant coaches, and so I wouldn't want to say that every sport was bad and every athlete's experience is bad. I think far from it. I think the problem, and one question I've been asked a lot is, this medals, focus on medals, and has that been the contributor to bad practice perhaps that we are seeing? And I think undoubtedly there has been an increased pressure on sports to deliver medals in return for funding, and as such that pressure is escalating all the way down to the athletes. And perhaps as an athlete within a bubble, a high performance bubble, sometimes you can lose perspective of things, and sometimes it's a number of really little things that will escalate into something much bigger. So yeah, I think that's the problem that we're seeing playing out at the moment.
So what's the solution, Vicki? The White investigation is going on. The White report is going on into British Gymnastics. UK Sport have now said that they're going to do a 12-year Olympic and Paralympic funding programme to try and take off some of the you've got to perform in the next 4 years element of pressure on athletes, if you like. Is that enough, or what more needs to be done?
I think it's a really good start. It gives sports some more assurance that they don't have to deliver medals, time and time again with immediate focus. I think some of it also comes down to sports being really mindful, and we talk about elite sport. it is about performance. It is about medals. And I don't think anyone, you ask any athlete, they don't do what they do to not try and get on the podium. So let's not kid ourselves that it's not about producing world-class performances and winning medals. I think it's how you do it, and we can get wrapped up sometimes in, the scientific advancements and the world-class coaching, and sometimes it's the simple thing that, we're dealing with human beings, we're dealing with passionate human beings that are trying to do something that most other people can't do, and emotions are really high, and it's just about that emotional intelligence and learning to work with people and treat them with the respect that you would want to be treated yourself. And I think that's where sometimes we're seeing sports falling short. And it's transparency, it's good communication, it's all those small things that can, if you don't have them, can lead to much bigger problems.
I wonder whether it's something that we need to talk about. It's a tough subject, but has the mentality of athletes changed? You obviously mentioned that you enjoyed your experience and it was tough. I hate to use that horrible phrase that people use, snowflakes. Is there a question about the younger generation coming through that they are not strong enough or not willing to put up with things? Or actually, has it always been that way and we should have actually stopped it many moons ago?
I think there's been an increase in, and what I've witnessed on a personal front, I've seen an increase in perhaps poorer behaviour or unacceptable behaviour that athletes have had to kind of become subjected to. And I think some of that comes with an element of control in that athletes are now live by their award that they're given, and as such you're really vulnerable as an athlete. You can lose that award within 3 months notice, and athletes have rent or families or mortgages. And I think going way back when the personal award wasn't available to athletes, you had a little bit more autonomy or control or ability to speak up for yourself. And I think now athletes are probably in a much more vulnerable position, potentially, because they feel that their whole livelihood's at stake if they upset the wrong person. It's an interesting perspective around, our athletes just getting softer. I think it's more athletes are more willing to speak up and stand up for what's not acceptable. That said, we do get a number of athletes that come to us that do want to challenge a sport, and we have to say to them, we're afraid you don't have a case to answer. So it's not always about jumping on and supporting an athlete. Always we will be fair to them and say, that's just unfortunately the brutal side of elite sport. The process that you've gone through has been a fair one, and I'm afraid you might not like the outcome, but we can't support you. So I don't know, it's a difficult one, but I think overall it's more about athletes just feeling more comfortable about wanting to speak out.
Was Amy Tinkler right to speak out in the way that she did and take her battle with British Gymnastics so publicly?
I think it's down to the individual. It's clearly years of frustration, and I'm really sad that one thing I always ask myself is, as chair of the BAC, as a growing organisation, why didn't Amy feel that she could come to us? And we didn't have the opportunity, whereas with a lot of sports we have the opportunity to go in, meet the athletes and share with them the services that we provide and offer. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity, despite asking on a number of occasions, to go into gymnastics to do that with the gymnasts. It's sad.
Was there a reason for that, Vicki?
Yeah, why wouldn't they have you in?
I think you probably have to ask the sport that. I think sometimes there's a perception that the BAC may be trying to look for problems. And, ultimately, we're there to tell the athletes why we're here, why we exist. And then if they want to come to us, that's absolutely fine. We wouldn't go in looking for problems where there weren't any. But I always become suspicious of sports that don't want to necessarily open their doors to And so, I think perhaps in that case, that was, it was unfortunate that Amy then perhaps didn't know an awful lot about the BAC, despite being an automatic member, and having to go public in the way that she did. I guess it was born of a significant amount of frustration on her part.
Are there lessons then for you as an organisation there in terms of getting your foot in the door at these organisations, but getting your message, however you do that, to all these potential Olympians, Paralympians, current Olympians and Paralympians, and past Olympians and Paralympians? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, our priority is to the 1,400 athlete membership that we have every year, and we have to be really creative around how we engage with those athletes. We've actually, going through the first lockdown that we had was quite helpful for the BAC, because we had athletes at home more readily available to engage with than we ever normally would. So we had some fantastic virtual coffee catch-up mornings with athletes, really got to hear from across the 40 sports what was going on the ground with them, give us some really good insight and build some really positive relationships. But there absolutely is more work to be done. But I guess the challenge we have is that we're an incredibly small organisation that doesn't receive a significant amount of funding. So we can only, what I'd like, when we look about the future of the BAC, we want to be an awful lot more proactive rather than reactive to the problems. But a lot of that comes with resource and investment into the organisation.
I wonder, Vicki, as well, whether you think people should follow your lead a little bit, and we need more athletes having a say in sport governance.
I think athlete representation at every level is really important. I think sometimes it's helpful to have an athlete that's perhaps gone away, left the system for whether it's a year or two, because when you first retire, your focus is on you and your experience. And it was helpful for me to go off and do something different for a couple of years and then come back, where I had the opportunity to see the experience of other athletes in other sports, and that was fantastic. When I covered the 3 games with the British Paralympic Association, it was brilliant for me to see, okay, well, rowing did it this way, but actually there's 39 other sports that do it this way, and they're all different. And I think I'm really passionate about supporting athletes in trying to advance and have an input in the say into their sports are run. We're advocating for some comprehensive training for athletes. We have a network of what we call athlete representatives that we try to support and buddy up and provide training to. And I have an open rule within the BAC that we have annual ambassadors at the BAC, which are current athletes, and I like to invite them onto board meetings just so they experience that board environment, which potentially could be really intimidating for athletes when they if it's their first time. I remember 8 years ago going to my first board meeting and being really intimidated, really. So to give them some level of exposure and confidence to then move forward is really important too.
Because there's been a lot of focus on who is on board members of British sport organisations, and I think we all know that there's a lot more work needs to be done in diversity and equality, but also having athletes on the boards. Do you think maybe World Athletics is a better organisation with Seb Coe in charge of it because of the experience he's had of being an athlete?
Yeah, I think so. I think he gives a good insight. They also have a really active athlete commission as well that feed into the World Athletics Board, and my role within the integrity unit, which is in some way separate to World Athletics itself, also engages and works really closely with the athletes as well, because we recognise that their insight is really important.
And with the mention of Seb Coe, that probably brings us on to one of the other huge issues in sport, and one that you've been very vocal about, which is doping in sport, of course. And tell us, you stepped down from WADA. You were part of it, but very publicly you said, I don't want to be part of it anymore. Why not?
Yeah, I did I was 1 year into my second term at WADA, and when I first started in the athlete committee, it was a really it was a really good organisation to be part of. The athlete voice was really strong. It was listened to, and then I guess there was a change of leadership, and I guess frustration started bubbling, particularly around Russia and the way that WADA managed that situation. And I think myself and quite a few others actually on the board were really disappointed and frustrated with the way that WADA handled that. I felt quite strongly that that WADA is so heavily dominated by the International Olympic Committee, and kind of does what it says, that I just found that my voice just my opinion didn't necessarily matter. My voice wasn't being listened to, and I felt as a consequence, and there's only so many times you can speak out and say I don't agree with what this organisation's doing before people say, well, why on earth are you there then? And when people, to begin with, I thought, well, perhaps I can influence from the inside, is what a lot of people say, but in order to do that, you've got to at least have your voice being listened to and heard, and mine wasn't. So I decided to step down and focus my attention elsewhere, where I could actually perhaps have a more impact.
You describe yourself there as an insider. I'm an outsider, and I've got a couple of observations looking in. One, when I go to press conferences, say ahead of the World Athletics Championships, and top gold medal winning athletes are asked about doping, there doesn't seem amongst many to be much of an appetite to tackle the issue or call out their friends, whether that's Christian Coleman or whoever, this week. So that's one observation. And two, my second observation is that it seemed to be that we were always looking at a plan to try and get Russia back involved, where actually maybe it would have been better to say, well, what are the sanctions? We had Craig Spence from the IPC on this podcast recently, and the IPC, I thought, did really well around Rio, whereas the IOC seemed to want to have Russia and Russian athletes involved at any cost, and that just seemed wrong as an outsider.
Yeah, I agree. I think from a WADA and IOC decision, I was so proud of the IPC for taking the stance that they did. I think it instilled confidence from the Paralympic athlete community as well in the organisation that is going to look after their best interests. And I think the IOC took the easy road out and passed the responsibility onto the international federations, which was really disappointing at best. And with regards to doping and athletics, I think that there's a balancing act between people that are involved in athletics trying to protect the reputation and feeling that talking about doping actually might mean that the reputation of athletics is going to be damaged. I think the opposite in that, and that's certainly the view that the Athletics Integrity Unit have, is that the more we publish these high profile cases of catching high profile athletes doping, the more it shows that we're cleaning up the sport. And I think there are athletes nervous to speak up. One thing I've been really excited about being involved with the Integrity Unit is that they're so advanced in their way that they are looking at doping in sport and their intelligence and investigation into trying to catch the real cheats in sport. So not the inadvertent dopers, the ones that have taken the wrong substance because it's been contaminated with something, but they haven't done it purpose. It's more those deliberate cheats that are micro doping and go into the X degree to mask and cover up this doping with massive amount of sport support behind them.
But just on that, Vicki, just to play devil's advocate, you can get people getting off on a technicality through missed tests. I mean, we've seen Christian Coleman get punished, but he was previously had a missed test, but it was then not ruled relevant because of a technicality, and that happens for some people too much.
Yeah, I think there's a massive piece that needs to be done to look at the whereabouts system that WADA manage, and like you say, that there's an increasing amount of frustration around some of the technicalities of other high-profile athletes recently being let off. And I think, without going into the ins and outs of each case, I think that there's a lot of tightening up that needs to be done. And one of the other things that I've suggested that the integrity unit might want to do is just have some live audience debates around some of the cases that they can talk about, to explain why certain decisions have been made. I think athletes tend to get really frustrated and angry because, on the face of it, in an athlete history test, why haven't they been banned? And I think if they have the ability or the option to dial in and listen to really hear what's been going on and have that level of understanding, it will help them realise.
So disappointing that the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is hearing the Russia appeal about being banned from international sport, isn't being held in public.
Yeah, very disappointing.
There's no way of knowing the ins and the outs. You want to know the process, as you said, don't you? You want to hear, athletes want to hear the reasons.
Absolutely, you've just got to be completely transparent, and if you are, then you're going to solve yourself a lot of problems in the end if you're not hiding anything, because athletes will then become educated and understand and perhaps understand the decisions they made at the end of it. If you conduct hearings behind closed doors, you're always going to have frustrations and angry athletes.
Before we just sort of finish up by talking about some of your career and your achievements, Vicki, without trust, what is sport? And at the moment, I'm seeing world records being broken left, right and centre. But I don't feel that WADA's probably been testing during the global pandemic as well as they should. And I simply don't trust what I'm seeing. And once that leaves sport, then what have we got?
I know. Well, that's the devastating impact that doping is playing. Is having on sport, because it's pretty heartbreaking. It must be really heartbreaking for those clean athletes that are delivering the performance of their life, and everyone automatically looks. And I have to admit, I'm guilty of that sometimes, and think, are they clean? And
we all are, though. We all are.
And everybody is, and I think that's why we have to work to fast track WADA at 100 miles an hour to become the organisation that it needs to be in order to protect the integrity of sport from a doping perspective. And it needs to advance very, very quickly in order to do that.
Just last question on WADA. When you left, you said they were spineless and appalling. Still the same?
Yeah, I'm afraid not much has changed. They have an enormous opportunity to do some amazing stuff, but they really have to start fresh.
Let's talk a little bit before we wrap up about you and your journey, if you like, Vicki. As we mentioned, a two-time world champion, a Paralympic bronze medalist as well. Was sports administration always something that you thought you were going to end up doing?
No, I fell into it really. I trained as a sports psychologist, and I finished my masters at Brunel Uni, and I thought perhaps that's where I might go. But I think having worked at the British Paralympic Association and then and worked with so many athletes, and then seeing what was happening with the BAC at the time, where it was so poorly funded and not operating in the way that it should or needed to be, I felt that there was an opportunity there to turn the organisation around, I guess it was a good challenge for me, being a retired athlete, to give back to something, to sport. And so it was mainly by pure luck, chance, that I fell into that, rather than anything that I aspired to do.
And you said, of course, you had a positive experience as an elite sports person. Were there ever any moments in your career where you felt that you would need to have talked to an organisation like the one you now chair?
No, I don't. I think I saw athletes around me that would have benefited from it. But personally, no. I was pretty confident, mature athlete, and I felt that I could stand up and stand up for myself quite well. I think particularly younger athletes could do with that support perhaps more. But then I don't know. There's plenty of athletes that are, you know, world champions that need the support of the BAC. So I guess perhaps I was fortunate and lucky at the time and place that I was that I didn't feel that I'd ever needed the BAC.
And when you, as you say there, maybe witnessed behaviours that you thought were wrong, did you feel at that point you had the voice or the strength that you could have called someone out on that if you saw a teammate or a colleague being, you know, behave badly towards?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, although I will say, I think, you know, sadly at that time, athletes as individuals are pretty selfish, and you're there to look after yourself, and particularly if they're competitors. I mean, there comes a certain point. If I ever saw something that was, you know, really bad, I'd have certainly said something. But you know, there's a time and a place where you just end up looking out for yourself and get your head down and you crack on with training, and you know, you're battling out for a seat in the boat.
As a world champion, a Paralympic medalist, we're heading into hopefully another Paralympic Games next year. Fingers crossed it's still on. Where do you think Para-GB are at the moment, and how damaging has lockdown been?
Yeah, well, I think pre-lockdown they were in a really exciting place. I think that the COVID-19 has posed some unique challenges for some Paralympic athletes, particularly those with higher spinal cord injuries, or, you know, that are more susceptible or more at risk to contracting COVID. So I think there's some significant risks that need to be managed, and I think that the BPA and the Paralympic GB team are completely all over that and working really well with the sports. I think Tokyo itself actually presents quite a big problem for the Paralympics, Paralympians going out there. And, you know, I was quite surprised before I had conversations with the BAPA around how inaccessible Tokyo is. You know, you'd think about it being such a modern, vibrant city, actually the hotels and everything are not accommodating. So even pre-games camps and trying to find just suitable accommodation for Paralympic athletes has been really challenging. So there's been a lot of challenges that the BPA have faced and overcome. But I think it hasn't been the easiest games for them to perhaps deliver to.
And I just wanted to finish off as well, Vicki, asking, you know, we've talked a lot about sport in this podcast and the downsides of it, if you like, and the negativity. Do you still watch sport, and does it still bring you joy?
Yeah, it does, without a shadow of a doubt. I still you know, despite all the doom and gloom, I love it. I you know, if I could get back, the training was the hard bit, the racing I loved, and every time I see a race of any kind, I want to be involved, even though my body couldn't take it anymore. So yeah, I love watching all forms of sport, and it does still give me joy. And I have 3 young children that are heavily involved in sport, and it's wonderful to see them enjoying it too.
So you miss it. You were proud to be part of it, but you're still doing tremendous work within it. Victoria Aggar, Chair of the British Athletes Commission, thank you very much for speaking to Anything But Footy's Great British Bosses.
Lovely speaking to you.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.